Hey, this is Anthony Effinger with Willamette Week, and I'm back today, and I'm talking with David Terry, who's the Global Director of Strategy at Wyden and Kennedy, the advertising firm here in town. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So usually we start these questions with, how's your quarantine been?
I'd have to say that um, if any writer who's making their way in the world writing and getting paid for it went to an editor and presented them with the story that I've uh, will tell you, that editor would throw them out of the room and say, "There's no way that would ever happen. That is completely implausible." Because what happened to me just prior to my quarantine on February 14th, 2020, I received a double lung transplant from the University of Washington Medical Center in Seattle. And then 3 weeks later, I was released into what was then the epicenter of a global pandemic.
Tell us about the procedure.
And basically, they cut me in half and took out both my lungs and put in two new lungs and stopped my heart and started it back up again. And here I am, alive and breathing. And, I say it to everybody, and it's almost becoming a cliche, but I'm just so damn happy to be alive and breathing.
Now tell me why you had to have this done.
Um, uh, uh, I had a disease that was slow and progressive, and the actual disease itself was never completely confidently diagnosed. It it had many features, namely that it was slow and progressive and inflammatory in nature, and it was diffused throughout my lungs. But the most important part was that it ultimately ended in fibrosis. So I had some sort of disease that ended up being pulmonary fibrosis. All my lungs were going to be all areas of my lungs were going to eventually be scarred, and once scarification happens, then they're gone. They're no longer usable, and that was happening. Um, it feels like over a course of 2 decades, but it accelerated over the last 5 years, ultimately to the point where the only thing that was going to save my life was a lung transplant. And um, and I was on a lung transplant list for about a year. Um, and then I got a call on February 13th, 2020, and I was transplanted on Valentine's Day.
Do you know anything about your donor?
No, the system is set up in such a way that it protects the identity of the donor and the donor family, and um, everyone is encouraged, and it's no problem to write a letter or something to the donor family, which I did, I think, even before I got out of the hospital. Um, but then that process is goes through a series of gates in order to protect the family's privacy, and there's certain things that I would never be able to say to them, like where I live, and and there's questions that I don't ask them, like where do they live and stuff like that. And it was basically just a letter of gratitude,
Mm.
and I'll write to them, and then the letter is the people who procure the organ, who help the family through the process of donation, will tell the family that one of one of the recipients has written you a letter, and then it's up to the family whether they even want to read the letter. Um, and so, and I wrote them, but I have no idea. They've not responded, and I don't even know if they decided to read it. And I understand, because it's like I represent two sides of one coin. One side being very joyful, which is I'm alive, and I can breathe and I can do things that I never thought that I would ever be able to do. But I can only do that because um, some person died. And so however many days out I have of joy and happiness, there's that many days that another family is dealing with an immeasurable loss. And that will always be a part of how I feel about this. Is like I carry both those sides. It was like the joy of being able to live again with just the immeasurable loss represented by what's inside me.
And when did you know that things were different in your chest?
Part of the difficulty of understanding of like that I was different is that um, you never know, even when you go under, whether or not the surgery is going to take place, because they have to take the lungs out of the donor, and something may not be right with the lungs, so they may abort the surgery, and that happens. And many people have what's called a dry run, and so they put you under, but I'm not sure whether or not I'm actually going to get them, and um, and uh, so when I woke up, my first question was, I wanted to know, did they do it? Did they do it? Did they do it? But you can't speak because you're intubated. You just have these like it's impossible to make a noise
I mean,
and or
intubated
anything.
means you have a tube down your throat that's
Yeah, I got that's breathing for me. I have an air tube down my mouth, and you're also tied down to the bed because apparently some people reach in and they pull out their air tube, and that's um, and we've been told there's like the no one ever should witness an air tube being put in a person who's conscious because it is a very uncomfortable thing to watch, and and that's what they would have had to have done. So so it was like my hands are tied, I can't speak, and I have this burning question. I remember, did they do it? Did they do it? Did they do it? And they were more concerned with just seeing whether or not I was cognizant, whether I could understand them, but I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't ask them any questions. And then they would put me back under. And, it really wasn't until I think 24 or 48 hours later that they took my air tube out that I was able to just confirm. It's like, do I have new lungs?
I read the other day that they're doing lung transplants. So they've done one at least for a COVID victim.
I
So
read
we may
that.
see more of this. I'm wondering if you have any advice to those people.
I feel like my advice is more for the healthy and for the living. It's like be a donor. I am I am a living, breathing, walking, running, cycling um, example of what that does, and the happiness and joy and gratitude that it puts back into the world.
How has this changed you?
I had an edge before, like a hate and a bitterness and a cynicism that um, is not there anymore. It still creeps up, but I just take a breath and I'm like, and it just disappears. And there's just no time for it. It was like it's not worth it. There's no time for it, and and it really doesn't matter. Um, it's just not. It just doesn't help anything at all. I mean, and I used to I used to jokingly say that I do my best work under hate. There was like an energy to hate, and it was like, and I would tap into it. It was like hate and anger, and I'd use it. Just, and uh, I don't have it anymore. And in fact, I'm like, and if that's what's required for the work that I need to do, then that's not the work I need to do, and I won't do it. Um, and I mean, I'm not really, I don't know if transplant has changed me into something that I wasn't, or whether transplant has erased the shitty things about me that I never liked and just, you know, let me be more of who I am. And, um, and I'm still finding that out, but I do know that the kind of nastiness that I used to carry around inside of me is like gone. Is it's just like, and that in itself is an unbelievable gift.
Yes, 100%. I'm a donor, and this interview shows me why.
Mm.
And I can't thank you enough for telling your story. Um, and I wish you many more bike rides.
Thank you.